The bottle shattered inches from Nora Vance's head. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just kept her eyes on the puddle of whiskey spreading across the saloon floor like spilled blood, glass shards catching lamplight, and calculated in her head how much that would cost her. Half a day's tips. The medicine Ethan needed was already overdue. "You deaf girl!" The voice belonged to Jake Harlan, railroad foreman, drunk before sundown most days. "I said bring me another." Nora straightened, her spine protesting the movement. Long hours on her feet and counting. She had started her shift when the sun was still cold behind the eastern hills, and now it was bleeding out somewhere beyond the canyon walls. Her feet had gone numb long ago. That was a mercy. "I'll get you one," she said. Her voice came out flat, drained of everything except function. "Soon as you pay for that one." Harlan's face went red. The other men at his table, miners, ranch hands, the usual collection of dust and desperation, went quiet. Trouble was building, the kind that could get a girl fired. Or worse. But Nora was too tired to care anymore. She had woken that morning to Ethan's coughing, the wet, rattling kind that meant his lungs were filling again. She had held him upright until the fit passed, then counted their money by candlelight. They were down to pennies between them and starvation. The doctor wanted money just to look at him. The medicine cost even more. Numbers. Everything in Nora's life came down to numbers now. "You got a smart mouth for a girl whose daddy died owing half the town," Harlan said, pushing his chair back. It scraped against the floor, a sound like bones grinding. "Maybe someone should teach you some manners." The saloon went quieter still. Even the piano player stopped, his hands hovering over the keys like birds, unsure where to land. Nora's fingers tightened around the serving tray she was holding. Cheap tin, dented on one side from where a cowboy had thrown it at the previous girl. That girl had quit, or been fired, or just disappeared one day. Nobody seemed sure which, and nobody much cared. "My daddy died working," Nora said. Each word cost her something. Pride was expensive out here, more expensive than whiskey or medicine or hope. Mine collapse wasn't his fault. Mine collapse was because him and the others were too stupid to notice bad air, Harlan said. He was on his feet now, swaying slightly. "Everybody knows it. Whole town knows it." That was the lie they had told. The easy lie, the convenient one. 12 men dead in the Silver Creek mine, and the company had blamed the workers. Poor judgment, they had said. Negligence. The territorial judge hadn't even bothered holding a real inquiry. Just signed the papers the mining company's lawyers brought him and called it settled. Nora had been young when they pulled her father's body out of that hole in the ground. She was older now, and not a single day had passed where she hadn't thought about the weight of earth and darkness, about dying slow and suffocating while rich men counted money in offices far away. "Get out," she said. Harlan blinked. "What? You heard me?" "Get out of my saloon." "Your saloon?" He laughed, and the other men joined in. Nervous laughter that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Girl, you don't own nothing. You're nobody. You serve drinks and you clean up piss, and if you're real lucky, maybe one of these boys will marry you someday, and you can spend the rest of your life washing their drawers instead." The owner, Harlan, was watching from behind the bar. Fat man with broken veins in his nose and tobacco stains on his fingers. He wouldn't help, couldn't afford to. The railroad boys drank heavy and paid well. A waitress was replaceable. Nora knew all this, had known it since her first day working here, when the owner had explained the rules. Don't steal, don't complain, don't cause trouble. The customers are always right, even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. She had followed those rules for years, smiled when men grabbed at her, apologized when they spilled drinks on her, kept her mouth shut when they said things that made her skin crawl. She had swallowed every bit of anger, every flash of pride, every desperate urge to be anything other than invisible. But today, Ethan had coughed up blood. Just a little. Just a fleck of red on the handkerchief she had pressed to his mouth. But she had seen it, and she knew what it meant. The disease was winning. Her brother was dying by inches, and she was here, serving whiskey to men who would never remember her name. "I said get out," Nora repeated. Harlan took a step toward her. He was a big man, heavy through the shoulders, with hands like ham hocks. Nora was small, and maybe 110 pounds when she had eaten regular, which she hadn't in a while. The mathematics of violence were not in her favor. She didn't move. "You think you're tough?" Harlan's breath hit her face, hot and sour. "You think because your daddy died, you get to act like you're—" The front door opened. It shouldn't have mattered. Doors opened and closed all day in a saloon. Men came in, men left. The world kept turning. But this was different. Nora felt it before she saw him. A shift in the air, a change in pressure, like how you could sense a storm coming even when the sky was still clear. The man who walked in was tall, rangier than Harlan, but harder looking, like he had been carved out of something that didn't break easy. He wore dark clothes, dusty from travel, and a hat that shadowed his face. But Nora could see his eyes, light-colored, maybe gray or pale blue. They swept the room once, taking in everything. The broken bottle, Harlan looming over her, the other men watching like coyotes circling something wounded. Then those eyes settled on her, and something in Nora's chest did a strange, small twist. "Place still serving?" the stranger asked. His voice was quiet, controlled. Western accent, but educated underneath it, like he had learned to talk from books before he learned to talk from the saddle. "Kitchen's closed," the owner called out, grateful for the interruption. "But we got whiskey and beer." The stranger nodded. He crossed the room, not hurrying, not slow, and took a seat at a corner table where he could put his back to the wall and see both doors. Old habit, careful habit. Harlan was still standing in front of Nora, but the moment had shifted. The tension bled out of him like air from a punctured tire. He muttered something that might have been an insult, or might have been nothing, then shoved past her toward the bar. Nora let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The owner was already pouring Harlan another drink, on the house probably, smoothing things over. That was how it worked. The girl apologizes. The customer gets placated. Everyone pretends nothing happened. Nora walked to the corner table. Up close, she could see the stranger more clearly. Mid-30s probably, maybe a few years older. Clean-shaven, which was unusual out here where most men wore beards to hide behind. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, white against tanned skin. His hands rested on the table, relaxed but not soft. Working hands. "What can I get you?" Nora asked. "Whiskey, whatever's decent." "None of it's decent, but some of it won't kill you." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close. "I'll take those odds." Nora turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "You all right?" She looked back. He wasn't watching Harlan, or the owner, or the other men. He was watching her, really watching her, and the question sounded genuine. That was rare enough to be startling. "I'm fine," she said. "You don't look fine." "Well, I am." "Do you want that whiskey or not?" This time he did smile, small and brief as a match flaring. "Yes, ma'am." Nora went to the bar and poured from the bottle the owner reserved for customers who could tell the difference between rot gut and something that had actually seen the inside of a barrel. She brought it back and set it down without spilling a drop. Small victory, but she would take it. The stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver dollar. He placed it on the table between them. "Drink's 30 cents, Nora said. "I know." She stared at the coin. A whole dollar for one glass of whiskey. That was almost as much as she made in tips on a good night. The kind of money that could buy Ethan's medicine with change left over for food that wasn't just beans and bread. Pride was expensive. Medicine was expensive. Everything was expensive. Nora took the dollar. "Thank you," she said, and hated how her voice cracked on the words. "You're welcome." She walked away before he could see her face do something stupid like cry. She didn't cry. Hadn't cried since her father's funeral, and even then she had waited until everyone left before she let herself break. Tears were a luxury, like rest or hope, or believing tomorrow might be better than today. The rest of the shift passed in the usual blur of pouring and carrying and cleaning. Harlan drank himself mean, and then meaner, before his friends dragged him out around closing. The stranger stayed longer, nursing his whiskey, watching the room with those careful eyes. He didn't bother her, didn't call her over with crude comments or grabbing hands, just sat there, quiet and still, like something carved into the landscape. When he finally left, Nora found another silver dollar under his glass. She pocketed it quick before the owner could see and claim it for the house. The saloon closed. Nora swept the floors, wiped down the tables, emptied the spittoons, all the glamorous work nobody saw. The owner counted the till and gave her 2 days' wages, barely enough to keep her and Ethan fed and housed in the cramped room they rented above the general store. But with the stranger's money, she had nearly 5. The doctor's office opened early. Nora would be there waiting when he unlocked the door. She walked home through streets that were empty except for shadows and the occasional drunk sleeping it off in an alley. Red Hollow at night was all darkness and dust. Buildings that looked like they might collapse if you leaned against them wrong. It had been a mining town once, prosperous for about 15 minutes before the easy silver played out. Now it was just another place where desperate people went to die slow. The room above the general store was small and smelled like damp and old wood. Ethan was asleep when she came in, curled on his side on the narrow bed they shared. She could hear his breathing, rough and labored, even in sleep. Nora sat down on the floor beside the bed and counted her money again by moonlight coming through the one small window. Not enough for medicine and food both. She chose medicine. At dawn the next morning, she was standing outside Doc Ellis's office when he arrived. A bent old man with kind eyes and hands that shook from drink, but still did good work. "Nora Vance," he said, not surprised. He unlocked the door and gestured her inside. "How's Ethan?" "Bad. He's coughing blood now." Ellis's expression went grave. He didn't say what they both knew, that blood meant the tuberculosis was advanced, that the medicine might not work anymore, that Ethan was probably going to die before he saw his 17th birthday. "I need more of the tonic," Nora said, "and anything else you can give him. That'll run about $8 for a month's supply." "I have 5. Ellis looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled a brown bottle from his cabinet, along with a smaller vial of something darker. "Give him a spoonful of the tonic 3 times a day with food. The laudanum is for when the pain gets bad. Not more than a few drops, or it'll stop his breathing. I can't pay for all this with $5. "I know." He put the bottles in her hands and folded her fingers around them. "Pay me what you can, when you can, or don't. I'm too old to chase down debts." Chase. Nora's throat closed up. Kindness was harder to take than cruelty sometimes. Cruelty you could armor yourself against. Kindness slipped through the cracks. "Thank you," she managed. She walked back to the room and measured out Ethan's first dose. He swallowed it without complaint. He had learned not to complain about anything a long time ago, and then fell back asleep. Nora sat on the floor and ate a piece of stale bread for breakfast. She had a few hours before her next shift at the saloon. She should sleep. Her body was screaming for it. Instead, she lay there with her eyes open, staring at the cracked ceiling, doing mathematics. How many shifts before they couldn't pay rent? How long could she stretch the medicine? What happened when it ran out? The numbers never worked out. They never had. But she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. That had to count for something. The stranger came back that night. Nora saw him walk in. Same dark clothes, same quiet way of moving. He took the same corner table without being told. This time, the owner himself brought the whiskey over, all smiles and courtesy. Word must have gotten around about the tips. Nora kept her distance at first, serving other customers, trying not to watch him. But she felt him there, a weight in her peripheral vision, and maybe twice she caught him looking her direction before his eyes moved on. Around 10, she brought him a second glass without being asked. "Thanks," he said. "You keep tipping like you do. I'll bring you the whole bottle. Might take you up on that." She turned to leave, but again his voice stopped her. "Can I ask you something?" Nora tensed. Here it came. The catch. Nothing in this world was free, and $2 tips bought expectations. "What?" she asked. "You always work this hard?" Of all the questions she had expected, that wasn't one of them. "I work as hard as I need to," she said carefully. "Must need to pretty hard then." She studied his face, looking for mockery or pity, but found neither. Just curiosity, maybe. Interest. "My brother's sick," she heard herself say. "Medicine costs money, so yeah, I work hard." He nodded. Like that made perfect sense, like it wasn't anything pathetic or shameful. Just facts. "What's your name?" he asked. She shouldn't tell him. The owner had rules about getting personal with customers, but she was tired, and he had helped pay for Ethan's medicine even if he didn't know it, and somehow that seemed to matter. Nora Vance, Colton Reed. He didn't offer his hand to shake. Out here, women didn't shake hands with men they didn't know. Too familiar. But the exchange of names felt significant anyway, like a door opening somewhere. "Well, Mr. Reed," Nora said, "enjoy your whiskey." "Just Colton." She walked away before she could say anything else stupid, but she felt something shift inside her chest. Something small and dangerous that she immediately tried to kill. Hope was poison. Hope got you hurt. But Colton Reed came back the next night, and the night after that. He always sat at the same table, always ordered whiskey, always left silver dollars. He didn't talk much, just asked small questions about her day, about Red Hollow, about nothing important. He never touched her, never made comments about her body, never looked at her the way most men did, like she was something to use up and throw away. He just saw her. Other people started noticing too. The owner got friendlier, gave her better shifts. Some of the regular customers began treating her with something that almost resembled respect. Even Harlan kept his distance, though he glared at her from across the room like she had personally insulted him. And the tips kept coming, not just from Colton, but from others. Now, like his attention had made her valuable somehow. Nora hated that. Hated that her worth went up because a man had deemed her worth looking at. But she pocketed the money anyway because Ethan needed it, and pride didn't pay for medicine. After a couple of weeks, she had saved nearly $20, enough to pay the doctor in full and buy real food, and maybe, just maybe, get through the next month without choosing between rent and eating. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hunted. Because nothing in Red Hollow came free. Every gift carried weight. Every kindness had a price tag. Sooner or later, Colton Reed was going to want something from her, and when he did, she would have to figure out what she was willing to trade. The answer scared her more than she wanted to admit. It was a Thursday night, nearly 3 weeks since Colton first walked through that saloon door, when everything changed. Nora was carrying a tray of drinks to a table in the back when she heard Harlan's voice cut through the noise. "Hey, Reed, heard you've been spending a lot of time in town lately." Colton looked up from his whiskey. His expression didn't change, but something in the air went taut. "That right?" he said mildly. "Yeah. Funny thing is, nobody knows what you're doing here. You ain't bought property, ain't hired on with any of the ranches, just hanging around, drinking whiskey, watching the help." The saloon went quiet the way it always did when trouble started building. Nora set the tray down and moved toward the bar. Getting clear. This wasn't her fight. Whatever was happening between these men had nothing to do with her. Except Harlan's eyes flicked her direction, and she realized with cold certainty that it had everything to do with her. "Man can drink where he wants," Colton said. Still mild, still calm, but his hands had moved off the table. "Ready? Sure can. But people talk, you know. Wonder why a cattle baron from Stillwater County would spend 3 weeks nursing whiskey in a nothing town like this." Harlan smiled, ugly and knowing. "Some folks think maybe it's not the whiskey you're interested in." Heat crawled up Nora's neck. Around the room, she could see the other customers watching, listening, forming judgments. In a town like Red Hollow, a woman's reputation was the only currency she had besides her body. Lose one, and you'd end up trading the other. "That's enough," the owner said from behind the bar, but his voice lacked conviction. Harlan ignored him. "Just seems strange is all. Rich man like you, pretty girl like her. Might make a person wonder what arrangement you got worked out. Might make a person think..." Colton stood up. He didn't slam his chair back or raise his voice. He just rose to his feet with the kind of controlled precision that said he had done violence before and wouldn't mind doing it again. "Finish that sentence," Colton said quietly, "and we'll go outside and settle this properly." Harlan's smile faltered. Up close, the difference between them was obvious. Harlan was bigger, heavier, probably stronger. But Colton looked like coiled wire, like something that would cut you before you realized you were bleeding. "No need for trouble," Harlan said, backing down but trying to save face. "Just making conversation. Make it somewhere else." Harlan left, taking his friends with him. The rest of the customers went back to their drinks and their cards, the entertainment over. Nora stood frozen by the bar, fury and shame twisting in her gut. She hadn't asked for Colton's protection, hadn't asked for his attention. She had just been trying to survive, and now she was the subject of speculation. The girl who had apparently caught the eye of someone important. The math was already working itself out in her head. The owner would fire her within a week, afraid of losing customers who didn't want to drink in a whorehouse. The landlord would evict her because respectable men didn't rent to women of questionable virtue. Ethan would die without medicine, and she would end up exactly where Harlan implied she was headed. All because a stranger had been kind to her. Colton walked to the bar and set down money for his tab. "I'm sorry," he said to Nora. "That wasn't my intention." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something crack open inside her. Anger mostly. At him, at Harlan, at this whole godforsaken town. At herself for hoping things might be different. "What was your intention?" she asked. Her voice came out harder than she meant it, sharp enough to cut. "To help. I didn't ask for your help. I don't need your help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Not from you." The words felt like swallowing glass, but she forced them out. "I don't know what you want from me, mister. Work, but I can't afford it. So please, just leave me alone." Something crossed his face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. But he nodded once and turned toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back. "For what it's worth," he said, "I never wanted anything from you. I just thought you looked like someone who could use a friend." Then he was gone, leaving Nora standing there with her heart hammering and tears she refused to let fall burning behind her eyes. She didn't see him again for a couple of days. Without Colton's tips, her income dropped by nearly half. The other customers went back to treating her like furniture. The owner started making comments about her attitude, about how she needed to smile more, be friendlier. Harlan came back and sat at his usual table, smirking every time she walked past. The medicine lasted another week. Then it ran out. Ethan got worse. The coughing fits came more frequently, lasting longer. Sometimes he couldn't catch his breath for minutes at a time, his face going gray, while Nora held him and tried not to scream. She went to the doctor and begged for more tonic on credit. He gave her 3 days' worth and told her gently that it wasn't doing much good anymore, that she should prepare herself. Prepare herself? Like you could prepare for your little brother dying. Like there was a mathematical formula for grief. On the 3rd night after Colton left, Nora finished her shift and walked home through streets that smelled like dust and horse piss and despair. She climbed the stairs to her room and found Ethan awake, sitting up in bed, looking at her with eyes that seemed too old for his 16 years. "You should let me go," he said. "What?" "To the territorial hospital. They'd take care of me there." The territorial hospital was where they sent people to die when their families couldn't afford to watch it happen at home. Ethan would be one more skeleton in one more iron bed, forgotten by everyone except the overworked nurses who would wash his body when he finally stopped breathing. "No," Nora said. "Nora," I said, "no. You're killing yourself trying to keep me alive. You don't sleep. You barely eat. You work yourself. I'm fine." "You're not fine." Ethan's voice cracked, starting a coughing fit that bent him double. Nora rushed to him, but he pushed her away weakly. "Let me go, please. Let me go somewhere they can help, and you can have a life." "You are my life," Nora said. Her voice was steady, even though everything inside her was breaking apart. "You're all I have left, so no, we're not giving up." Ethan looked at her with an expression that was equal parts love and exhaustion, and something that might have been pity. "Then we're both going to die here," he said quietly. "Maybe. Probably." The mathematics supported his conclusion, but Nora had stopped believing in mathematics somewhere between their father's funeral and this summer. "Then we die," she said, "but we do it together." She lay down beside her brother and held his hand until he fell asleep, his breathing rough and wet in the darkness. Above them, the ceiling leaked shadows, and outside Red Hollow settled into its nightly rhythm of violence and commerce and slow forgetting. Nora closed her eyes and did the math one more time, looking for an answer that didn't end in death or worse. The numbers still didn't work, but somewhere in the desert night, she heard the sound of hoofbeats on hard-packed dirt, steady and sure, like something inevitable approaching, like fate, or mercy, or reckoning, like Colton Reed coming back. The hoofbeats stopped outside the general store just after dawn. Nora was already awake, had been for hours, watching the gray light creep across the floor while Ethan's breathing rattled in the silence. She heard boots on the stairs, deliberate and unhurried, and knew who it was before the knock came. She opened the door to find Colton Reed standing there with his hat in his hands. "I'm sorry to come so early," he said, "but I need to talk to you." "I'm working in 3 hours," Nora said. Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Whatever you're selling, I can't buy it." "I'm not selling anything." He glanced past her into the room, saw Ethan curled on the bed, small and breakable in the morning light. Something shifted in his expression. "Can we talk outside?" She should have said no, should have closed the door and gone back to the arithmetic of dying. But Ethan was sleeping for once, really sleeping, and she was so tired of that room and its shadows and the smell of sickness. She stepped out onto the landing and pulled the door shut behind her. They stood there in the weak sunlight, facing each other like duelists waiting for someone to count to 10. "I shouldn't have left," Colton said finally, when Harlan started his talk. "When you told me to go, I should have stayed and explained." "Explained what?" "Why I'm here. What I want." He turned his hat over in his hands, nervous in a way she hadn't seen before. "I know how it looks. Rich man shows up, pays too much attention to the help, rumors start. But it's not what they think." "What is it then?" He looked at her straight on, those pale eyes steady. "I needed to know if you were real." Nora laughed, a short bark of sound with no humor in it. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means I've spent 15 years surrounded by people who want things from me. Land, money, connections, protection. Everyone wants something. They smile and lie and pretend, and after a while you forget what honest looks like." He paused. "Then I walked into that saloon and saw you refuse to apologize to a drunk who could have gotten you fired. And I remembered. You don't know anything about me. I know you work yourself half to death for a brother who's dying. I know you'd rather starve than take charity. I know you've got more pride than sense, and a temper you keep locked down so tight it's a wonder you don't explode." He smiled slightly. "That's more than I know about most people." Nora wanted to argue, wanted to push him away again, but the words wouldn't come. She was too tired, too worn down by the weight of holding everything together. "Why are you really here, Colton?" "Because I need your help." That startled her. "My help with what?" "I'm buying land north of here, 5,000 acres bordering the Bitterroot. I need someone who knows the territory, knows the people, can tell me who's honest and who's running a game." He shifted his weight. "I'm willing to pay fair wages, room and board included, medical care for your brother." The world tilted sideways. "You're offering me a job," Nora said slowly. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I trust you. Because you're smart, and you don't lie, and those are rare qualities." He looked at her carefully. "And because your brother needs help, you can't give him working at Harlan's saloon." There it was, the hook buried in the kindness. She had known it was coming, had been waiting for it, but it still hit like a fist to the chest. "I don't need rescuing," she said. "I'm not offering rescue, I'm offering employment." "What's the difference?" "Rescue is something done to you. Employment is something you choose." Colton put his hat back on, adjusting the brim. "Think about it. I'll be in town another 2 days. If you decide you're interested, come find me at the hotel." He turned to go, then stopped. "One more thing. Harlan was wrong about us, but he was right that people will talk. If you take this job, the rumors will get worse before they get better. You need to know that going in." "I'm used to rumors." "Not like these, you're not. Not when there's money involved." His expression went hard. "There'll be people who think you're my mistress. People who think you slept your way into the position. People who'll say worse things than that to your face and behind your back." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I won't have you walk into something blind. You deserve to know what you're signing up for." He started down the stairs, then paused again. "For what it's worth, I don't give a damn what they say. But I know you might." He left before she could respond, his boots echoing in the stairwell, and Nora stood there, feeling like she had been hit by lightning. A job, real wages, medical care for Ethan. A chance. She went back inside and sat on the floor next to the bed. Ethan stirred, opened his eyes part way. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep and sickness. "Nobody," Nora said. "Then maybe somebody." "I don't know yet." She spent the rest of the morning doing arithmetic in her head, but this time the numbers were different. She calculated wages and expenses, medicine and food, the cost of hope versus the price of pride. By the time she had to leave for her shift, she still hadn't decided. The owner was in a mood when she arrived. He had heard about Colton's visit. Of course he had. Nothing stayed secret in Red Hollow for more than 10 minutes, and he wasn't happy. "That cattleman came sniffing around your room this morning," he said while she tied on her apron. "He had a business proposition." "I bet he did." The owner's face went red. "You think I don't know what kind of businessmen like that want with girls like you? It's not like that. It's always like that. You leave to go work for him, and within a month, you'll be warming his bed and calling it a job." He jabbed a finger at her. "You want to sell yourself out? That's your business, but don't come crying to me when he gets tired of you and throws you out with nothing." Nora felt something snap inside her chest. She had taken a lot from the owner over the years. Low pay, bad shifts, looking the other way when customers got too rough. But she was done swallowing insults. "I've worked for you for years," she said quietly. "I've never been late, never stolen, never caused you a single problem. And you're calling me a whore because a man offered me honest work?" "Honest work?" The owner snorted. "There's nothing honest about what he's offering. You don't know that. I know men. I know how this story ends. Then I guess we'll find out, won't we?" Nora untied her apron and set it on the bar. "I quit." The owner blinked. "What?" "You heard me. I quit. You can keep the wages you owe me. Consider it payment for all the times I didn't spit in your drinks." She walked out before he could respond, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She had just quit the only job she had, burned the only bridge keeping her and Ethan fed, and she didn't even know if Colton's offer was real. But she couldn't go back now. Couldn't unsay what she had said. Couldn't swallow that much pride, even if she tried. She went to the hotel. It was the nicest building in Red Hollow, which wasn't saying much. 3 stories of weathered wood with actual glass in the windows, and a front desk staffed by a woman who looked at Nora like she had tracked in something foul. "Help you?" the woman asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather not. "I'm looking for Colton Reed. Room 12, top floor." "Top?" The woman's eyes narrowed. "He expecting you?" "Yes," Nora lied. She climbed the stairs, each step feeling like walking toward a cliff edge in the dark. At room 12, she stopped, raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. This was it, the moment where she either chose to keep drowning in Red Hollow or grabbed onto something that might save her, or might just drag her under faster. She knocked. Colton opened the door in shirt sleeves, his collar undone, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. When he saw her, something careful entered his expression. "Nora, I need to know this is real," she said without preamble. "I need to know you're not just some rich man playing games with the help because he's bored. It's real. Prove it." He stepped back and gestured her inside. The room was simple but clean, better than anywhere Nora had ever slept. There was a desk by the window covered in papers, maps, documents with official seals. Colton picked up one of the papers and handed it to her. "Deed to the property. 5,000 acres purchased last month. I'm building a ranch, cattle operation, some farming. Maybe horses if the land supports it." He pulled out another document. "Employment contract, standard terms. $30 a month plus room and board. Medical expenses covered for you and any dependents." Nora stared at the paper in her hands. $30 a month was more than she had made in 3 months at the saloon. What would I actually be doing? Helping me build something from nothing. I need someone who can talk to the locals, negotiate with suppliers, manage books, handle the 100 small problems that come up when you're starting from scratch. He leaned against the desk. "I need someone I can trust not to steal me blind or sell information to competitors. Someone who'll tell me when I'm making a mistake." "You barely know me." "I know enough." He crossed his arms. "You want references? I can give you names, people who'll vouch for me. You want to see the land first, make sure it's real? We can ride out there tomorrow. You want time to think about it. Take all the time you need." Nora looked at the contract again, reading the words carefully. Everything seemed legitimate. spelled out in black ink on official paper. Wages paid monthly. Termination clause that went both ways. No mention of anything beyond standard employment. What about Ethan? What about him? The contract says medical expenses covered. What does that mean exactly? Colton's expression softened. It means we get him to a real doctor, one who knows what he's doing, not some frontier drunk with a bag of patent medicines. It means whatever treatment he needs, however long it takes. That could cost hundreds of dollars. I'm aware. You'd do that for a stranger. I'd do it for my employee's brother. There's a difference. He straightened up. Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm doing this out of pure charity. I need good people, and good people don't work well when they're worried sick about family. It's practical business sense. That, more than anything else he could have said, convinced her. Charity, she could reject. Business, she understood. I have conditions, Nora said. All right. First, this stays professional. I work for you, you pay me, that's all. No expectations beyond what's in the contract. Agreed. Second, if the rumors get bad enough that they hurt your business, you let me go. No arguments, no trying to protect me. I won't be responsible for damaging what you're building. Colton frowned. That's my condition. Take it, or we're done dish for done here. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but only if you agree that if I ever cross a line, you tell me straight, and give me a chance to fix it before you walk. Fine. Third condition, Papa. Ethan stays with me. Whatever housing you're providing, he's part of the deal. Already assumed that. And if he gets worse, if the doctor says there's nothing more to be done, I need time to beat you with him, however long it takes. Something in Colton's face shifted, went softer. Of course. Nora took a breath. This was happening. She was actually doing this. When do we leave? Day after tomorrow. I've got business to finish here first. He held out his hand. We have a deal? She looked at his hand, calloused and steady, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. How it probably would go wrong, because that's how things worked in her life. But Ethan was dying, and she was out of options. And sometimes, you had to bet everything on a stranger's word, because staying put meant certain death. She shook his hand. We have a deal. The next day and a half passed in a blur of preparation and goodbye. Nora packed their few belongings. Didn't take long when you owned almost nothing, and paid a final visit to the doctor to settle her debt. He waved it off, said she had paid enough already in worry and tears, but she left $5 on his desk anyway. Payment mattered. Debt was its own kind of trap. She didn't go back to the saloon, didn't want to see the owner's smug face or Harlan's knowing smirk. Let them think whatever they wanted. She was done performing for Red Hollow's judgment. Ethan took the news about leaving with quiet relief that broke her heart a little. He should have been scared or uncertain, but instead he just looked grateful, like he had been waiting for permission to hope. You think the doctor can help me? He asked, while she folded his spare shirt. I think we're going to find out. And if he can't? Nora stopped folding and looked at her brother, thin and pale, all sharp angles and shadowed eyes. 16 years old and already half ghost. Then at least we tried, she said. At least we went down swinging. Ethan smiled, small and sad. That's very you. What is? Fighting even when you know you're going to lose. I don't know we're going to lose. Nora, I don't, she said firmly, and neither do you. So we're going to get you to this doctor, and he's going to figure out what you need, and you're going to get better. That's the plan. And if the plan doesn't work, then we'll make a new plan. That's what we do. They left Red Hollow at dawn on a Thursday morning. Colton had a wagon loaded with supplies and a horse tied to the back. He helped Ethan into the wagon bed, settled him among blankets with a gentleness that surprised Nora, then offered her a hand up to the driver's seat. She took it, feeling the strength in his grip, and pulled herself up. "Ready?" Colton asked. Nora looked back at Red Hollow one last time. The crooked buildings, the dusty streets, the saloon where she had spent years of her life serving drinks to men who would never remember her name. She thought about her father buried in the cemetery on the hill, about all the ghosts this town held. "Ready," she said. They rode north through country that opened up as they went, leaving behind the cramped canyon walls for rolling grassland that stretched toward mountains blue with distance. The air smelled different out here, cleaner somehow, like the dust hadn't settled into everything yet. Colton drove in silence for the first hour, letting the horses set their own pace. Ethan dozed in the back, the rocking of the wagon lulling him to sleep. Nora sat stiff and uncertain, hyper-aware of Colton beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "You can relax," he said eventually. "I don't bite." "I'm relaxed. You're sitting like you're about to jump off a moving wagon." She forced her shoulders down, clenched her jaw. "Better?" "Marginally." He glanced at her. "You always this tense around people?" "Just around people I don't know who've upended my entire life." "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment. "You want to know about me? About where I came from? What I'm doing out here? I want to know if I made a mistake trusting you." "Can't answer that yet. Ask me again in a month." Despite herself, Nora almost smiled. "You're not big on reassurance, are you?" "I'm big on honesty. Reassurance is just pretty lies most of the time." He adjusted the reins. "But I'll tell you this much. I've never hurt anyone who worked for me. Never cheated them. Never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. You'll earn every dollar I pay you, and you'll earn it honest. That's the best promise I can make." It wasn't comfort, but it was something. Nora settled back against the seat and watched the landscape roll past, trying not to think too hard about what she had done. They stopped for lunch beside a creek where cottonwoods made dappled shade. Colton unhitched the horses to let them drink, while Nora helped Ethan down from the wagon. Her brother looked better out here, she thought. The color wasn't back in his face, but he seemed to breathe easier, like the open air agreed with him. "How much farther?" Ethan asked. "Another few hours, maybe," Colton said. He was unpacking food from one of the crates, bread and cheese and dried apples. Simple, but more than Nora had eaten at one time in months. "We'll make it before dark." They ate sitting on rocks by the water, not talking much, just listening to the creek and the wind in the trees. It was the most peaceful Nora had felt in years, and she didn't trust it. Peace was temporary. Peace was a trick the world played before it kicked you in the teeth again. But Ethan was smiling, actually smiling, and that was worth something. They reached the property as the sun was starting to sink toward the mountains. Colton pulled the wagon to a stop on a rise and pointed. "There," he said. Nora looked. The land rolled out in front of them, grass and sage and scattered pines, all of it glowing gold in the late light. A river cut through the valley floor, silver and lazy, with good timber along its banks. To the north, the mountains rose up like a wall, still snow-capped even in summer. To the south and east, the grassland stretched for miles. It was empty. It was enormous. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest hurt. 5,000 acres, Colton said quietly. Most of it usable. Water rights to the river, timber rights to the forest, room for 1,000 head of cattle. Maybe more if we manage it right. "Where's the ranch?" Nora asked. "We're going to build it." He pointed to a spot near the river where the land flattened out. "House there, barns and outbuildings behind it. Bunkhouse for the hands, though we won't need that right away." He looked at her. "What do you think?" What did she think? She thought it looked like the kind of place people dreamed about when they were stuck in towns like Red Hollow, dying by inches. She thought it looked impossible, She thought it looked like the sort of gamble that would either make them or break them. "It's a lot of empty," she said. Colton laughed, surprised and genuine. "That it is. But that's the point. Can't build something from nothing if there's already something in the way." They made camp that night near where the house would eventually stand. Colton set up a tent for Nora and Ethan while he took his bedroll under the wagon. Ethan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the travel. But Nora lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness. Coyotes in the distance, the river murmuring, wind in the grass. No drunk shouting, no piano music, no boots on stairs. Just space and silence, and stars so thick overhead they looked like snow. She heard Colton moving around outside, checking the horses probably, banking the fire. After a while, his footsteps came near the tent. "You awake?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, can't sleep. Not used to the quiet. Give it a week. You'll wonder how you ever slept with noise." He paused. "There's coffee if you want some." Nora climbed out of the tent, careful not to wake Ethan. Colton had the fire going low, just enough for warmth, and 2 tin cups waiting. He poured for both of them and handed her one. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, not talking, just drinking bad coffee and watching sparks rise into the dark. "Thank you," Nora said finally. "For this? For the job. For bringing us here, for everything. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what the work actually looks like. I'm not afraid of work. I know. That's why I hired you." He stared into the fire. "Tomorrow we ride into Stillwater, town about 15 miles west. I've got a meeting with a builder, and I want you there to hear what he's proposing. After that, we'll see the doctor about Ethan." Nora's hand tightened on her cup. "You already have a doctor lined up?" "Sent a telegram 3 days ago. He's expecting us." Colton looked at her across the flames. "I told you I'd handle the medical expenses. I meant it. What if it's not something he can fix? Then we'll find someone who can. There are specialists in Denver and San Francisco. We'll figure it out." The casualness with which he talked about spending hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars should have made her suspicious. Instead, it just made her tired. She was so tired of fighting, of calculating, of trying to make numbers work that would never work. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "And don't say it's practical business sense. Nobody spends this kind of money on an employee's sick brother, unless there's a reason." Colton was quiet for a long time, staring at the fire like it might have answers. "I had a sister," he said finally. "Younger, like Ethan is to you. She got sick when she was 15. Fever, cough, the whole thing. My father said doctors were a waste of money, that she'd either get better or she wouldn't. He was too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit he couldn't fix it himself. He stopped, swallowed hard. She died 3 weeks later, and I swore that if I ever had the means, I'd never let anyone else lose family because they couldn't afford a doctor." He looked up at Nora. "So yeah, maybe it's not just business sense. Maybe it's personal, but it's still the truth." Nora felt something shift in her chest, some wall she had built cracking just slightly. "I'm sorry about your sister." "So am I." He stood up, dumped out the last of his coffee. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Nora alone with the fire and the stars, and the realization that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about Colton Reed. Maybe he wasn't looking for anything from her except what he had said. Honest work, honest help, someone he could trust. Maybe some people really were just kind. The thought terrified her more than any amount of cruelty ever had. Stillwater was bigger than Red Hollow, but carried the same smell of ambition mixed with failure. The main street ran wide enough for freight wagons to turn around, lined with buildings that tried hard to look permanent. Brick facades over wooden frames, painted signs that weren't yet peeling. A bank, a hotel, with actual columns out front. 3 saloons. A mercantile that took up half a block. The kind of town that wanted to be a city someday, but probably never would. Colton drove the wagon straight to the doctor's office, a 2-story building with clean windows and a shingle that read, Dr. Harrison Webb, M.D. Harvard Medical School. Harvard, Nora said, trying to keep the skepticism out of her voice. What's a Harvard doctor doing in Montana territory? Same thing the rest of us are doing, running from something or running toward it. Colton set the brake and climbed down. I'll help Ethan inside. You coming? She was already moving, helping her brother down from the wagon bed. Ethan looked worse after the journey, his face gray with exhaustion, but he didn't complain. He never complained. The inside of the office smelled like carbolic and something else. Something sharp and medicinal that made Nora's nose sting. A nurse in a white apron looked up from a desk. Mr. Reed, she said. Dr. Webb is expecting you. Bring the patient back to the examination room. They followed her down a hallway lined with anatomy charts and framed certificates. The examination room was bright, almost painfully so, with windows on 2 walls and lamps burning even in daylight. A man stood washing his hands at a basin, tall, 50-ish, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything. Ethan Vance? He asked, drying his hands on a clean towel. Yes, sir, Ethan said quietly. I'm Dr. Webb. Let's have a look at you. He gestured to the examination table. Up here, please. Miss Vance, you can stay if you'd like. Nora hadn't realized she had been holding her breath until it came out in a rush. She moved to stand beside Ethan while the doctor began his examination, listening to his chest, checking his throat, asking questions about symptoms and duration and pain. His hands were gentle, but thorough, and his questions were specific in a way that made Nora realize how little the previous doctor had actually known. Colton waited by the door, quiet and still, his hat turning over in his hands. After 20 minutes, Dr. Webb stepped back and looked at Ethan with an expression Nora couldn't read. How bad is it? Ethan asked. His voice was steady, but Nora could see his hands shaking. You have pulmonary tuberculosis, advanced stage. The blood in your sputum indicates cavity formation in at least 1 lung, possibly both. Webb spoke plainly, not sugarcoating, but not cruel either. Left untreated, you have perhaps 3 to 6 months. The room tilted. Nora grabbed the edge of the examination table to keep from falling. What about treated? Colton asked from the doorway. There's a sanatorium in Colorado Springs. High altitude, dry air, specialized care. They've had some success with cases like this, not cures, but extended remissions. Years in some cases. He looked at Ethan. It would mean leaving Montana, living at the facility for at least a year, possibly longer. The regimen is strict, fresh air, absolute rest, controlled diet, no exceptions. No. How much? Nora managed to ask. $60 a month plus initial admission fees. Call it $800 for the first year. $800. More money than Nora had seen in her entire life. More money than she could earn in 5 years. Maybe 10. I'll cover it, Colton said. No, Nora said immediately. You can't. That's too much. I said I'd cover medical expenses. This is a medical expense. $800 isn't an expense. It's a fortune. I can't let you. You can and you will. Colton's voice went hard. This isn't a discussion, Nora. The boy needs treatment. I have the money. End of story. It's not the end of anything. She turned on him, fury and fear, and something close to panic making her voice shake. You think I'm going to let you spend $800 on my brother? You think I can live with that kind of debt? I'd never be able to pay you back. Never be free of owing you. I'm not asking you to pay me back. That makes it worse. Don't you see that? That makes us. She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the word charity, couldn't admit what accepting this would mean. Ethan's hand touched her arm. We couldn't, but insistent. Nora, I want to go. She looked at her brother, at his hollow eyes and wasted frame, and felt something break inside her chest. Ethan, I'm tired of dying in front of you. I'm tired of watching you kill yourself trying to save me. His voice cracked. Please, let me go somewhere that might actually help. Let me try. Dr. Webb cleared his throat quietly. I'll give you folks some privacy to discuss this. Take all the time you need. He left, closing the door behind him. Nora stood there shaking, her hands clenched into fists, everything inside her screaming against this, against accepting help she couldn't repay, against being in debt to someone she barely knew, against the vulnerability of needing another human being. I'll draw up a contract, Colton said quietly. Official loan, standard interest, payment plan based on your wages. You can pay me back over 10 years, 20, whatever it takes. But we're doing this. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care this much? Because I have the money, and you need it, and your brother is 16 years old and deserves a chance to see 17. He crossed his arms. And because if I don't help when I can, then what the hell is the point of having money in the first place? Nora looked at Ethan, then at Colton, then back at her brother. The mathematics were simple. Ethan goes to Colorado and maybe lives, or Ethan stays and definitely dies. There was no equation where her pride mattered more than her brother's life. Fine, she said. The word tasted like surrender. But we do the contract, every penny accounted for. I pay you back if it takes the rest of my life. Deal. Colton opened the door and called Dr. Webb back in. When can he leave? I'll wire the sanatorium today. Assuming they have space, he could travel within the week. Webb looked at Ethan. You'll need to be strong for the journey. It's not easy. I can do it. They left the doctor's office and half an hour later with a folder full of papers, admission forms, dietary instructions, a letter of introduction for the sanatorium staff. Nora held them like they were made of glass, like they might shatter if she gripped too hard. Colton's next meeting was at a builder's yard on the edge of town. A man named Garrett was waiting for them, weathered and competent looking, with carpenter's hands and honest eyes. Mr. Reed, Garrett said, shaking Colton's hand. Good to see you. This the property manager you mentioned? Nora Vance, Colton said. She'll be handling day-to-day operations once we're up and running. Nora, this is Thomas Garrett, best builder in 3 territories. 2 territories, Garrett corrected, but he smiled when he said it. He nodded to Nora. Ma'am, Mr. Reed showed me the plans for the main house. Solid design, good bones. We can have it framed in 6 weeks, finished in 3 months if the weather holds. What about cost? Nora asked. She had looked at Colton's plans the night before, a sprawling ranch house with 6 bedrooms, indoor plumbing, a kitchen big enough to feed 20 men, the kind of place that cost real money. $1,500 for the house, another $500 for the barn and outbuildings, labor and materials included, but not furnishings. Garrett pulled out a ledger. I'll need half up front, the rest on completion, $2,000. Nora's head spun. Between Ethan's treatment and the construction, Colton was spending close to $3,000 before the ranch earned a single cent. When can you start? Colton asked. Week from Monday, assuming you approve the contracts. Let me see them. They spent the next hour going over paperwork, while Ethan dozed in the wagon outside. Nora listened carefully, learning the language of contracts and specifications, material grades, and completion schedules. Colton asked good questions, caught details she wouldn't have noticed. negotiated terms that seemed fair to both sides. This was business. This was how you built something real. Finally, Colton signed the contracts and shook Garrett's hand. "Pleasure doing business with you," Garrett said. "I'll have my crew on see you Monday morning." They found rooms at the hotel. 2 rooms, one for Nora and Ethan, one for Colton. Separate and proper, and exactly what the contract specified. Nora helped Ethan upstairs and got him settled in bed, while Colton went to arrange Ethan's travel to Colorado. Her brother fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day. Nora sat beside the bed and watched him breathe, counting each rise and fall of his chest like she had done 1,000 times before. She must have dozed off because she woke to knocking on the door. The room was dark, except for lamplight from the hallway. "Nora," Colton's voice quiet. "You awake?" She opened the door. Colton stood there with a telegram in his hand. "Sanatorium confirmed space. There's a train leaving Thursday morning. I can have someone escort him to Colorado Springs. Make sure he gets settled properly. Thursday. 3 days from now. I should go with him. You're needed here. Construction starts Monday, and I need you to oversee supply deliveries. Keep the books. Handle the 100 other things that'll come up." He paused. "I'll send Patterson. He's good people, used to work for me in Stillwater. He'll make sure Ethan gets there safe and has everything he needs. I should be with him. I know, but he'll be fine, and you'll be able to visit once we're established here." It was practical. It was reasonable. It was the right decision for everyone, except the part of Nora that wanted to hold her brother close and never let go. "All right," she said. "Thursday morning." The next 3 days passed too fast and too slow at once. Nora helped Ethan pack his few belongings, tried not to think about how small and young he looked, how frightened despite his brave face. Colton bought him new clothes for the journey, a warm coat, a hat that actually fit. Small kindnesses that kept adding up to a debt Nora couldn't calculate anymore. Thursday morning came cold and gray. They gathered at the train station. Nora, Ethan, Colton, and Patterson, a solid man in his 40s with kind eyes and a quiet manner. "I'll wire once we arrive," Patterson told Nora. "Let you know he's settled." "Take care of him," Nora said, her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I will, ma'am. You have my word." Ethan hugged her, thin arms holding tight. "Don't die while I'm gone," he whispered. "Don't you die either. Deal." He pulled back, tried to smile, failed. Then he was following Patterson onto the train, climbing the steps slowly, turning to wave once before disappearing inside. The train pulled out 5 minutes later, steam and smoke and the screech of metal on metal. Nora stood on the platform watching until it disappeared around the bend, taking her brother toward hope or death or something in between. She didn't cry, wouldn't let herself. Crying was for people who had time for it. "Come on," Colton said quietly. "Let's go home." Home. The word felt foreign. Home was Red Hollow. Was that tiny room above the general store, was waking up at dawn to Ethan's coughing. This place, this empty stretch of land waiting to become something, wasn't home yet. But maybe it could be. They rode back to this property in silence. The land looked different now, less like a dream and more like work. Real work. The kind that would break your back and callous your hands, and maybe, if you were lucky, give you something to show for it. At the end, Garrett's crew arrived Monday morning with wagons full of lumber and tools. 12 men, hard-looking and competent, who didn't blink at taking orders from a woman. Colton had made it clear from the start. Nora spoke with his authority, and anyone who had a problem with that could find work elsewhere. Nobody had a problem with it. The work became everything. Nora kept the books, tracked deliveries, negotiated with suppliers who tried to overcharge until they realized she could do arithmetic faster than they could lie. She learned the difference between Douglas fir and ponderosa pine, between foundation-grade concrete and regular mortar. She worked long hours and fell into bed too tired to think, which was exactly what she needed. Colton worked alongside the crew, which surprised her. She had expected him to supervise from a distance, hands clean and voice loud. Instead, he was up on the frame with the carpenters, down in the foundation trenches with the laborers, everywhere at once, but never in the way. "You don't have to do this," Nora told him one evening. They were reviewing the day's expenses by lamplight, in the tent they used as a temporary office. "Do what?" "Manual labor. You're paying these men to build the house. You don't need to hammer nails yourself. I like knowing how things work. Can't manage what you don't understand." He flexed his hand, wincing slightly. "Besides, keeps me humble." "You need help with that?" He laughed. "More than you'd think. Grew up with money, never had to work for anything. Took me a long time to figure out the difference between owning something and earning it." "What made you figure it out?" His smile faded. "My father died and left me everything. I was young, stupid, thought I was smart. Spent years running the business into the ground before I realized I didn't know a damn thing." He looked at the ledger between them. "So I started over, learned from the men who actually did the work, listened to people who knew better than me. Built it back up the right way." "How long did that take?" 10 years, give or take. Long enough to know I don't want to make those mistakes again." He met her eyes. "That's why I need you here. You see things I miss. You ask questions I don't think to ask. I've been here a couple of weeks, and you've already caught 3 accounting errors, negotiated better prices on timber and concrete, and figured out a delivery schedule that saves us days on construction." He closed the ledger. "Don't sell yourself short, Nora. You're good at this." The compliment made something warm and uncomfortable twist in her chest. She wasn't used to praise, didn't trust it. "I'm just doing the job you hired me for." "I know. That's what makes it mean something." A week later, the telegram came from Colorado. Ethan had arrived safely, been admitted to the sanatorium, tolerated the journey better than expected. "Dr. Whitmore sends his regards and assures you of his best care." Nora read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. Ethan was alive. Ethan was somewhere safe. That had to be enough. The house took shape slowly, rising from the dirt like something inevitable. Walls went up. A roof went on. Windows got installed. Every day it looked more real, more solid, more like something that might actually last. Nora found herself thinking about permanence in ways she never had before. In Red Hollow, nothing was permanent. You worked until you couldn't work anymore, then you died or moved on or just faded into the dirt. But here, they were building something that might outlive them all. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 2 months in, Colton bought cattle. 50 head to start, good breeding stock from a ranch in Wyoming. They arrived on a Tuesday, driven by cowhands who stayed long enough to collect their pay and share some advice. "You'll need more hands come spring," the trail boss told Colton. "Can't manage a herd this size alone, not if you're planning to grow it." "I know. I'll hire in the spring. Make sure you get good men. Cheap labor costs more in the long run." After they left, Colton and Nora stood looking at the cattle grazing in their new pasture. 50 doesn't seem like much, Nora said. "It's a start. By next year we'll have calves. Year after that we can sell. Build the herd slow and steady." He leaned against the fence rail. "Rome wasn't built in a day and all that." Rome fell apart too. Always the optimist. Someone has to be realistic. He smiled at that. Fair enough. But sometimes realistic and pessimistic look awful similar from the outside. And sometimes optimism is just another word for stupid. Also fair. He pushed off the fence. Come on. Garrett says the kitchen's finished. Want to see it? The kitchen was enormous, just like the plans had shown. A cast-iron stove that could cook for an army. A sink with actual running water piped in from the well. Counters made of thick cut pine. Windows on 2 sides let in light that made the whole space glow. It's too much, Nora said. It's what we need. Once we hire hands, someone's got to feed them. Can't do that with a camp stove and a prayer. Still seems excessive. Wait till you see the rest of the house. He wasn't wrong. 6 bedrooms upstairs, each one bigger than the entire room she had shared with Ethan in Red Hollow. A parlor with a fireplace you could stand up in. A dining room with a table that could seat 12. A library. An actual library with built-in shelves and a ladder on rails. Why does a ranch house need a library? Nora asked. Because I like to read, and because I'm building a home, not just a place to sleep. He ran his hand along one of the empty shelves. Besides, you strike me as someone who reads. She did when she could get books, had taught herself from whatever she could find or borrow, reading by candlelight, until her eyes burned. I used to, she said carefully. Well, now you can again. I'll have books shipped from San Francisco. Dear Denver, wherever. You helped me fill these shelves. It was such a small thing, such a casual offer, but it hit Nora harder than it should have. Books. Time to read them. A life that had space for something besides survival. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For treating me like I'm worth more than my labor. Colton looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Nora, I need you to understand something. You are worth more than your labor. You're worth investing in, as an employee, as a person. I know that probably sounds like empty words from someone who's already got money and power and all the advantages, but I mean it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let down her guard, and trust that this wasn't just another game, another way for a rich man to feel good about himself by playing savior to a poor girl. But belief was dangerous. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. I should get back to the books, she said, instead of any of the things she was thinking. Right, of course. Colton stepped back, giving her space. I'll be in the barn if you need me. He left, and Nora stood alone in the library that wasn't yet a library, surrounded by empty shelves waiting to be filled, and wondered when exactly her life had become something she didn't recognize anymore. That night, lying in her bed in the finished bedroom Colton had assigned her, the second largest room in the house with windows facing east to catch the sunrise, Nora tried to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few months. She had left Red Hollow with nothing but a dying brother and $2 silver. Now Ethan was in Colorado receiving treatment. She was living in a house with indoor plumbing and glass windows, working a job that paid more in a month than she used to make in a year. And the man who had made it all possible seemed to want nothing from her except what the contract specified. It didn't add up. The mathematics were wrong somehow. People didn't do this, didn't spend thousands of dollars on strangers, didn't offer help without strings attached, didn't treat employees like they mattered beyond their usefulness. Except Colton did. Every day, in 100 small ways, he did. And that scared her more than anything else, because if she let herself believe in it, believe in him. What happened when it all fell apart? When he changed his mind, or got bored, or revealed what he really wanted? She had survived Red Hollow by expecting nothing and being surprised by nothing. This, whatever this was, required different mathematics entirely. Mathematics she didn't know how to do. 3 days before the house was officially finished, a rider came from Stillwater with a telegram. Colton read it standing in the yard, his face going hard, in a way Nora had never seen before. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the telegram without a word. "Urgent. Mine disaster. Silver Creek 12. Dead. Territorial investigation ordered. Your presence requested. Judge Matthews." Nora's blood went cold. Silver Creek Mine, where her father had died years ago, where 12 men had suffocated in the dark, while the company blamed them for their own deaths. "Why are they contacting you?" she asked, her voice so steady despite the roaring in her ears. Colton looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. "Because my family owns the mine," he said quietly. "We've owned it for 15 years. The world stopped. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "The Rourke Mining Company, my father's company, now mine. We own Silver Creek and 4 other operations in Montana territory." He wasn't looking at her anymore. Couldn't seem to. "I thought you knew. I don't know what I thought." Nora's hand started shaking. Your family's company. The mine that killed my father." "Nora, don't." She stepped back, the telegram crumpling in her fist. "Don't you dare. You knew. You knew the whole time. I knew your father died in a mine collapse. I didn't know it was Silver Creek until..." "Until when? Until you'd already decided to play the hero? Until you'd already bought my loyalty with money and medicine and a roof over my head?" Her voice was rising, breaking, fury and betrayal tearing through her like a wildfire. "This whole goddamn time, and you never thought to mention that your family was responsible for killing him." "We weren't responsible. The investigation cleared." "The investigation was a sham. Everyone knew it. The whole territory knew it. Your father's lawyers bought off the judge and blamed the workers and walked away clean while we buried our dead." She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "And you knew. You knew what that did to me, to my family, and you never said a word." "I'm not my father," Colton said, his voice low and tight. "What he did, what the company did. I didn't even know the details until after he died. When I took over, I found..." He stopped, rubbed his face. "There are documents, reports that were never filed, safety concerns that were ignored. My father knew that mine was dangerous, and he kept it running because closing it would have cost money. And that's supposed to make it better? You found out your father was a murderer and you just kept running his company, kept profiting from the same mines that killed people? I've been trying to fix it. Every mine we operate now has safety inspections, proper ventilation, engineers on staff. I've spent years cleaning up his mistakes. But you didn't tell me." Nora's voice cracked. "You had 100 chances to tell me, and you chose not to. Why?" Colton met her eyes finally, and what she saw there was complicated and painful and not enough. "Because I was a coward," he said. "Because I knew if I told you you'd leave, and He stopped. "I needed you here. For the ranch, for the work, and I liked having you here. So I told myself it didn't matter, that it was old history, that you didn't need to know. It matters to me." Tears were running down her face now, hot and bitter. "It was all that mattered. My whole life has been shaped by what your family did, and you thought you could just not mention it. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't give me back the years I spent barely surviving. Sorry doesn't..." Her voice broke completely. She couldn't do this. Couldn't stand here in this house he had built with blood money and pretend any of it was real. She turned and walked toward the barn where they kept the horses. "Where are you going?" Colton called after her. "Away from you. Nora, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." She grabbed a bridle off its hook. "You lied to me. Maybe not with words, but you lied by staying quiet, and I can't. I won't..." She couldn't finish. She saddled a horse with shaking hands, mounted up, and rode out without looking back. Behind her, Colton stood in the yard of his almost finished house, watching her go. and for the first time since she had met him, he looked completely lost. Nora rode until the horse was lathered, and her hands were numb from gripping the reins. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care, just needed distance between herself and the man who had made her believe things could be different. The land opened up around her, endless grass and sage, mountains in the distance going purple with approaching dusk. Beautiful country, cruel country, the kind of place that promised everything and delivered nothing but heartbreak. She finally stopped beside a creek, let the horse drink while she sat on a rock and tried to breathe through the pain in her chest. It felt physical, like something had broken inside her ribs and was cutting her from the inside out. Her father's face kept appearing in her mind, not the way he had looked in death, gray and broken, crushed by tons of earth, but the way he had been before, laughing at the dinner table, teaching her to read by candlelight, swinging her around when she was small enough to fly. The Rourke Mining Company had taken that, had known the mine was dangerous and sent men down anyway, because closing it would cost money, had covered it up, blamed the victims, walked away clean. And Colton had known. Maybe not all of it, maybe not right away, but he had known his family was responsible, and he had never said a word. Every kindness he had shown her, the tips, the job, Ethan's treatment, all of it suddenly felt tainted, like payment for a debt he had never acknowledged, like guilt dressed up as generosity. The sun was setting when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She didn't turn around, knew who it was, Santadas, without looking. Colton dismounted a few yards away, giving her space. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "I brought your coat," he said finally. "It's getting cold. I don't want anything from you." "I know, but you're going to freeze without it." He set the coat on a rock near her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back. I just need you to hear me out. 5 minutes, then I'll leave, and you never have to see me again if that's what you want." Nora stared at the creek. The water ran clear over smooth stones, indifferent to human suffering. She should tell him to leave, should refuse to listen to whatever justification he had prepared. But she found herself nodding instead. Colton sat down on a rock across from her, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to be safe. "My father was a bastard," he said bluntly. "Built his fortune on the backs of people he considered expendable, workers, competitors, anyone who got in his way. They were just obstacles to profit. I didn't see it when I was young, thought he was brilliant, thought the hard decisions he made were what success required." He picked up a stone, turned it over in his hands. "When I was young, there was a strike at one of our copper mines in Nevada. The men wanted better pay, safer conditions. My father brought in strike breakers, armed men who beat the workers bloody, killed 3 of them, broke the strike through terror." He threw the stone into the creek. "I was there. I watched it happen and I did nothing." Nora looked at him then, saw the shame written across his face. That's when I understood what kind of man he was, what kind of man I was becoming by following him. So I left, told him I wanted nothing to do with the company, that I'd make my own way. He laughed bitterly. He said I'd come crawling back within a year, that I didn't have what it took to survive on my own. But I didn't go back, not while he was alive. I worked ranches, drove cattle, took whatever jobs I could find, learned what real work looked like from the men who actually did it, learned the difference between earning money and taking it." He met her eyes. When he died years ago, he left everything to me. The mines, the money, all of it. I could have sold it off, walked away clean. Instead, I took over. Why? Because selling would have meant the new owners might be worse than he was. At least if I ran things, I could make changes, fix what was broken, Try to do right by the people working those mines. He stood up, paced. I shut down 3 operations that were too dangerous to run safely, updated equipment at the others, hired real engineers, implemented actual safety protocols. It cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of profit, but I didn't care. I couldn't live with myself otherwise. That doesn't change what happened to my father. No, it doesn't. Nothing changes that. He stopped pacing, faced her directly. When I found the documents about Silver Creek, the suppressed safety reports, the bribes to the judge, all of it, I spent a week trying to figure out how to make it right. But there's no making it right. 12 men died because my father valued money over lives. No amount of reform or restitution brings them back. So you just kept quiet. I kept quiet because I was a coward, because I knew if I told you, you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm responsible for your father's death. And maybe I am, in a way. Maybe owning the company makes me complicit, even if I wasn't involved. He rubbed his face, exhausted. But Nora, I swear to you, I didn't know it was Silver Creek specifically until a few months ago. I was going through old files, found a mention of the Vance family in a legal document related to the collapse. That's when I realized. A few months ago, before you came to Red Hollow. He nodded. So you did know. When you walked into that saloon, when you offered me the job, when you paid for Ethan's treatment, you knew the whole time. Yes, the honesty of it hit her harder than any excuse would have. He could have lied, could have claimed he just found out. But he didn't. Why? She asked. Why did you do all of this if you knew? Because I owed you. Because my family destroyed yours, and you deserve better than dying in that town serving drinks to men who would never see you as human. He took a step closer. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I know I can't. But I could at least try to give you and Ethan a chance at the life my father took from you. That's not how it works. You can't just... Nora stood up, anger flaring hot again. You can't erase what happened with money and jobs and grand gestures. My father is still dead. Those years of hell are still part of me. Nothing you do changes that. I know. Then what are you trying to accomplish? Redemption? Is that what this is? You're trying to redeem your family's sins by playing savior to the orphan daughter? I'm trying to do the right thing. His voice rose, frustration breaking through. I'm trying to use the money I inherited from a man I despised to help people he would have ground into dust. Is that wrong? Is trying to fix things worse than doing nothing? It's wrong when you lie about why you're doing it. I never lied to you. You lied by omission. You let me believe you were just some stranger who decided to be kind. You let me trust you without knowing the truth. She was crying again, furious at herself for it. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To realize everything you thought was real was built on a foundation of things left unsaid? Colton's shoulders slumped. No, I don't. But I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. They stood there into the growing darkness. 2 people separated by a chasm of history and hurt that no amount of words could bridge. The territorial investigation, Nora said finally. They want you there because another collapse happened. Yes, different tunnel, same mine. 3 men dead this time, 9 injured. Is it your fault? The way it was your father's fault before? I don't know. That's what the investigation will determine. I hired new management in Amamen, updated the equipment. But if they were cutting corners, if they ignored safety protocols, he shook his head. I'll own whatever responsibility is mine, but I need to know the truth first. Nora picked up the coat he had brought, wrapped it around herself against the cold. Her anger was still there, still burning, but exhaustion was creeping in around the edges. What happens now? She asked. I go to the investigation. I answer their questions. I look at the evidence and figure out what went wrong. He looked at her. And you decide whether you can keep working for the son of the man who killed your father. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's the reality we're in. He untied his horse, mounted up. The house is finished. You have a contract that says you're employed through next spring at minimum wage plus room and board. I'll honor that, regardless of what you decide. If you want to leave, I'll give you 3-month severance and a recommendation letter. If you want to stay, the job is yours. Just like that? Just like that. This is your choice, Nora, not mine. He turned his horse toward home. I'm leaving for Stillwater at dawn. I'll be gone at least a week. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. He rode off, leaving her alone with the creek and the stars, and the impossible weight of decisions she didn't know how to make. Nora didn't go back to the ranch house that night. She made a cold camp by the creek, wrapped in Colton's coat, and stared at the fire until it burned down to embers. Everything she had believed about the past few months had shifted. The kindness that had felt like salvation now felt like compensation. The job that had seemed like opportunity now felt like guilt money. Even the house, that beautiful, solid house, was built with profits from mines that killed men like her father. But Ethan was in Colorado because of Colton's money. Ethan was getting treatment, had a chance at life, because Colton had spent $800 on a stranger's dying brother. Did the source of the money change that? Did it matter that it came from blood and suffering if it was used to save a life? She didn't have answers, just questions that spiraled endlessly, chasing their own tails. When dawn came, she rode back to the ranch. The house stood solid against the morning sky, windows catching sunlight, smoke rising from the kitchen chimney where one of Garrett's men must have started a fire. Colton's horse was gone. He had left already, riding toward whatever reckoning waited in Stillwater. Nora unsaddled her horse and went inside. The house was quiet, empty except for the ticking of the new clock in the hallway. She walked through rooms that still smelled like fresh sawdust and paint, trailing her fingers along walls that would outlast them all. In the office, she found the ledger open on the desk. Colton had left her a note. Nora, whatever you decide, thank you for these months. You made this place real. The books are current through yesterday. Patterson's contact information is on file if you need to check on Ethan. Take care of yourself. See, she read it 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in her pocket next to the telegram from Colorado. Then she sat down and opened the ledger. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers were honest in a way people never were. She went through every entry, checking figures, tracking expenses, verifying accounts. The work was familiar, comfortable, something she could control when everything else was chaos. 3 hours later, she found it. A separate account labeled Restitution Fund. Entries going back years, payments to families, medical expenses, education funds, names she didn't recognize at first, then ones she did. Henderson, Martinez, O'Reilly, all families of men who died in Rourke Mining Company accidents. Her hands shook as she turned pages, adding up the total. Over $100,000 paid out in years. Money given to widows and orphans, to injured workers, to families destroyed by mining disasters. And there, near the bottom of the current page, Vance. Ethan. Medical treatment. Colorado Springs. Sanatorium. $800. It wasn't a loan, wasn't an advance on her wages. It was restitution. Payment for a debt Colton acknowledged, even if the law didn't. Nora closed the ledger and sat very still, trying to process what this meant. He had been doing this for years, quietly paying back families his father had destroyed, using the fortune built on their suffering to try and make amends. Not publicly, not for recognition or praise, just doing it because he believed he owed them. It didn't change what his father had done, didn't bring anyone back from the dead, or erase years of suffering. But it meant something. It had to mean something. She spent the week working. Garrett's crew was putting finishing touches on the outbuildings, and Nora threw herself into managing the details, paint colors and door hardware, and whether to put the feed storage on the north or south side of the barn. Small decisions that didn't require her to think about the larger questions, tearing her apart. The telegram from Patterson came on the 5th day. Ethan doing well, gained 2 pounds, coughing less. Doctors encouraged. We'll write full report this week. Nora read it sitting on the porch of the house that blood money built, watching the sun set over land bought with the same tainted fortune, and cried until she had nothing left. Colton returned on the 8th day. Nora was in the barn checking on the cattle when she heard his horse. She stayed where she was, brushing down the mare she had ridden that first day, giving herself something to do with her hands. He appeared in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. He looked exhausted, dusty from travel, thinner than when he had left, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Nora," he said quietly, "how did it go?" "About as bad as it could. The new foreman I hired was cutting corners, ignoring safety protocols to boost production. The tunnel that collapsed had been flagged as unstable by 2 different engineers, but he overrode them." Colton leaned against the doorframe. "I fired him, shut down the mine pending a complete safety review, settled with the families of the dead workers. The territorial governor is talking about new regulations for all mining operations. Will there be criminal charges? Against the foreman, probably. Against me?" He shrugged. "That depends on whether they think I should have known what he was doing. My lawyers say I'm legally clear, but morally..." He laughed without humor. "I hired the bastard. I'm responsible." Nora set down the brush and turned to face him. "I found the restitution fund." He went very still. "You've been doing this for years, paying back families your father destroyed. It seemed like the right thing to do. It's a lot of money. It's not nearly enough. It'll never be enough." He took off his hat, turned it in his hands the way he did when he was nervous. "I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix what was broken. But I had to try. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it felt like bragging. Like I was trying to buy absolution by pointing out all the good I'd done." He met her eyes. "I don't want credit for doing the bare minimum of decency. I just want to do it." Nora walked toward him slowly, closing the distance between them. He didn't move, just watched her with those careful eyes. "I've been thinking a lot this past week," she said. "About my father. About what your family did. About whether I can work for you knowing what I know. And I realized something. You're not your father. You're not responsible for his choices, his cruelty, his greed. You're only responsible for your own." She stopped a few feet from him. "And everything you've done since taking over that company has been about trying to fix his mistakes. That matters. It doesn't bring your father back. No, nothing will. But it means Ethan gets to live. It means other families get help they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. It means something is being built from all that destruction." She took a breath. "I'm still angry. I'm going to be angry for a long time, maybe forever. But I also understand that you're trying, and that's more than most people would do." Colton's throat worked. "So, you're staying?" "I'm staying, but I have conditions." "Of course you do. What are they?" "First, no more secrets. If there's something about your past or your business that might affect me, you tell me. I don't care how uncomfortable it is. I deserve to know." "Agreed." "Second, I want my father's name cleared, officially. I want you to fund an independent investigation into the Silver Creek collapse. And when they confirm it wasn't the workers' fault, I want a public acknowledgement. I want the record set straight." Colton nodded slowly. "I can do that. Should have done it years ago." "Third," Nora hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want to be part of fixing what's broken. Not just as your employee, but as a partner in making sure those mines are safe. I want access to safety reports. I want to be involved in hiring decisions for management. I want a say in how things are run. That's a lot of responsibility. I know, but if I'm going to profit from that company, even indirectly, I need to know it's being run right. I need to know we're not sacrificing people for profits. She crossed her arms. Can you give me that? He studied her for a long moment, something like respect dawning in his expression. Yes, he said, I can give you that. But it means you're not just working for me anymore. It means you're a real partner in this. Is that a problem? No. It's actually exactly what I need. Someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong, who'll fight for what's right, even when it costs money. He held out his hand. Partners. Nora looked at his hand, thought about all the ways this could still go wrong, all the reasons she should walk away clean. Then she thought about Ethan gaining weight in Colorado, about 12 families getting restitution they had never expected, about a man who had inherited his father's fortune and spent years trying to atone for sins that weren't his own. She shook his hand. Partners. The next 3 months were the hardest work of Nora's life. She split her time between the ranch and learning the mining business, poring over safety reports and accident records, asking questions that made managers uncomfortable. Colton gave her complete access to everything: financial records, personnel files, engineering assessments, and backed her up every time she pushed for changes. They hired a new foreman for Silver Creek, a grizzled veteran who had lost his brother in a cave-in and had no tolerance for cutting corners. They invested in new equipment, brought in outside safety auditors, established protocols that prioritized worker welfare over production quotas. It was expensive. It was time-consuming. It probably cost them a year's worth of profits. Colton never complained once. The independent investigation Nora demanded took 6 weeks. When the report came back, it confirmed what she had always known. The original collapse had been caused by inadequate ventilation and ignored safety warnings, not worker negligence. The territorial governor issued a formal statement clearing the names of the 12 men who died. Nora attended the ceremony where the statement was read. She stood beside Colton in front of reporters and officials and families of the dead. And when they asked her what she thought of the Rourke Mining Company's efforts at reform, she told them the truth. They're trying. It's not enough to erase the past, but it's a start. And I'll be watching to make sure they keep trying. One reporter asked if she was being paid to say that. She had smiled, sharp and cold. I'm being paid to make sure it's true. There's a difference. At the ranch, life took on a rhythm. They hired hands in the spring, good men who Nora personally vetted, making sure they would be treated fairly and paid honestly. The cattle herd grew. They planted crops in the bottomland, put in fences and corrals, built a bunkhouse that was clean and weatherproof, with real beds and stoves. Colton worked harder than any of them, up before dawn and working until full dark most days. But sometimes in the evenings, he and Nora would sit on the porch and review the books together, talking through decisions and plans. They didn't talk about the past much. It sat between them like a scar, visible, permanent, but not actively bleeding anymore. One evening in late summer, they were going over supply orders when Colton set down his pencil and looked at her. Can I ask you something? That's usually my line. He smiled slightly. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if none of this happened? If your father hadn't died? If you'd stayed in whatever town you were in before Red Hollow? Nora considered the question. Sometimes, but not the way you probably think. What do you mean? I don't imagine some perfect alternative where everything was easy. I imagine a normal life. My father working, me growing up regular, marrying someone local, having kids, dying in the same place I was born. What? She looked out at the land stretching away into darkness. It would have been fine. Probably happy even. But small. And now? Now I'm building something that matters. I'm making sure men like my father don't die for profit. I'm helping my brother survive. I'm learning things I never would have learned. Doing things I never could have done. She met his eyes. It cost me everything to get here, but I wouldn't go back. Not if I could. Colton was quiet for a moment. That's probably the kindest thing anyone's ever said about me. I wasn't talking about you. Weren't you? Maybe she was. Maybe somewhere in the past year, Colton had stopped being the son of the man who killed her father and become just Colton. Her partner, her employer. The person who had given her a chance when she needed it most. I got a letter from Ethan yesterday, she said, changing the subject. He wants to come home for Christmas. Doctor says he's well enough to travel if he's careful. Colton's face lit up. That's wonderful. Will you go get him, or should we send Patterson? I thought maybe we could both go. Make sure he's really ready. Talk to the doctors ourselves. She paused. If that's all right with you. Of course it's all right. We're partners, Nora. You don't need to ask permission. But she did, in a way. They had built something together over the past months. Trust, maybe, or something close to it. And she didn't want to damage that by assuming too much. They left for Colorado 2 weeks later, taking the train through country that had seemed impossible just a year ago. Nora watched the landscape roll past and thought about how far she had come from that dusty saloon in Red Hollow, serving drinks and counting pennies, and waiting for her brother to die. The sanatorium sat in the foothills outside Colorado Springs, a sprawling white building with porches where patients sat in the sun wrapped in blankets. Ethan was waiting when they arrived, standing on his own, smiling. He looked different, taller somehow, though that couldn't be right. Solid, where before he had been all angles and shadows. Color in his face that hadn't been there since before their father died. Nora! He ran to her, actually ran, and hugged her so hard it hurt. She held him and cried and didn't care who saw. You got fat, she said when she could speak. I gained 20 pounds. Dr. Whitmore says I'm a miracle. He pulled back, grinning. Or maybe just stubborn like my sister. Probably that. Ethan turned to Colton, suddenly shy. Mr. Reed, thank you for everything. Just Colton, and you're welcome. Colton shook his hand. You look good, kid. Really good. They spent the day at the sanatorium, meeting with doctors, reviewing Ethan's treatment plan. He would need another 6 months at least, but the prognosis was encouraging. With continued care, he could make a full recovery. I want to come home, Ethan said that evening. They were sitting on one of the porches, watching the sunset over the mountains. You will, Nora promised, in 6 months, after the doctors say you're ready. I mean for good. When this is over, I want to come work at the ranch. He looked at Colton. If there's a place for me, there's always a place for you, Colton said. But you should think about what you want to do. You're young. You could go to school, learn a trade, do anything. I want to learn ranching. I want to help build what you and Nora are building. Ethan's voice was firm. You gave me my life back. I want to use it for something that matters. Nora felt her throat close up. Her baby brother, who had been dying a year ago, talking about building a future. We'll talk about it when you're home, she managed. For now, just focus on getting well. They left the next day, promising to visit again in a month. On the train back, Nora sat beside Colton and watched the landscape blur past. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For saving him, for giving him a chance. I didn't save him. The doctors did that. You paid for the doctors. That's the same thing. Colton was quiet for a moment. Do you still hate me for what my father did? The question caught her off guard. She thought about it carefully before answering. No, she said finally. I hate what happened. I hate that my father is dead and nothing changes that. But you're not the one who killed him, and hating you for trying to make things right would be like hating the sun for rising after a storm. It doesn't fix what was broken, but it's still better than darkness." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You have a way with words, you know that? I read a lot. You should write, keep a journal or something. Document all this. Who'd want to read about a girl from nowhere building a ranch with blood money? Someone who needs to know that good things can come from bad beginnings. That people can change. That redemption is possible even when it seems impossible." He smiled. "Besides, it's not just your story. It's Ethan's. Mine. All the people working at the ranch, the families getting restitution, the miners working under better conditions. It's bigger than any of us." Maybe he was right. Maybe this was a story worth telling. Not because it had a neat ending or a simple moral, but because it was true. Messy and complicated, and built on foundations of grief and guilt, but real. They arrived back at the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon. The house looked different now, lived in, and solid. Smoke rising from chimneys, and laundry hanging on lines. Home in a way Nora had never had a home before. She stood in the yard, looking at everything they had built, and felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness, exactly. She wasn't sure she remembered what that felt like. But something close to it. Something like peace. "We did good," Colton said beside her. "We did all right," Nora corrected. "There's still work to do. Always is. But we've got time." They did. For the first time in her life, Nora had time. Time to build. Time to plan. Time to imagine a future that extended beyond next week's wages or next month's medicine. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But she was ready for it. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with snow that turned the grassland white and silent. Nora stood at the kitchen window watching it fall, coffee warming her hands, and thought about how different this winter was from the last. A year ago, she had been in Red Hollow, counting pennies and watching Ethan die. Now she was in a house with a fireplace that actually worked, with food in the pantry and money in the bank, and her brother was alive in Colorado getting stronger every day. The mathematics of survival had changed completely. Behind her, she heard Colton come downstairs, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. He had been up late the night before going over reports from the mines, and she knew he hadn't slept well. He never did when there was news of an accident, even a minor one. "Coffee?" she asked without turning around. "Please." She poured him a cup, and they stood together at the window, not talking, just watching the snow accumulate on fence posts and rooftops. "Patterson sent a telegram," Colton said finally. "Ethan wants to come home for Christmas after all. Says he's feeling strong enough." "What did the doctors say?" "They're cautious, but willing. As long as he takes it easy, doesn't overexert himself." He sipped his coffee. "I think we should let him come. Boy deserves to see what we've built." Nora felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Yeah, let's bring him home." They made the trip to Colorado 3 weeks later, just before Christmas. The sanatorium was decorated with pine boughs and candles, patients and staff preparing for the holiday with a kind of determined cheer that felt both genuine and fragile. Ethan met them at the entrance, bundled in the heavy coat Colton had bought him, looking healthier than Nora had ever seen him. Not completely well. There was still a tightness around his eyes, the careful way he held himself, but alive. Undeniably, gloriously alive. "Ready to see home?" Nora asked, hugging him tight. "I've been ready for months." The journey back was long, but Ethan handled it better than Nora expected. He slept most of the way, waking occasionally to stare out the train window at the passing landscape with an expression of quiet wonder. "I thought I'd never see Montana again," he said once. Thought I'd die in that white building breathing other people's air. You're tougher than you look, Nora told him. I'm tougher than I feel anyway. He smiled. Must run in the family. When they finally pulled up to the ranch in the wagon, Ethan went very still. The house stood solid against the winter sky, smoke rising from 3 chimneys, lamplight glowing in the windows. The barn and outbuildings stretched behind it, everything covered in fresh snow that made it look like something from a picture book. This is ours? Ethan asked quietly. This is home, Nora corrected. And yeah, it's ours. Ethan climbed down from the wagon slowly, taking in every detail. The hands who had been working in the barn came out to greet him. Carter and Wilson and old Martinez, who had lost a son in a mine collapse years ago. They shook Ethan's hand solemnly, welcoming him like he belonged. And Nora watched her brother stand a little straighter under their regard. That night they had dinner in the big dining room, just the 3 of them. Nora, Ethan, and Colton. The table that could seat 12 felt enormous with only 3 places set, but somehow it didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility. I want to work here, Ethan said over the roast chicken and potatoes. When the doctors say I'm ready, I want to learn ranching, help with the cattle, earn my keep. You don't need to earn anything, Colton said. Your family. Ethan shook his head. That's exactly why I need to earn it. I won't be a charity case, not even from people I care about. He looked at Nora. She taught me that. Pride matters, even when it's expensive. Nora felt her throat tighten. I also taught you that sometimes you have to accept help. I am accepting help. I'm accepting the chance to work, to build something, to be part of this. Ethan's voice was firm. But I want to earn my place here. Fair wages for fair work, same as anyone else. Colton looked at Nora, something like amusement in his expression. He really is related to you. Stubbornness runs deep, Nora agreed. They gave Ethan the bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with windows facing south to catch the winter sun. He settled in slowly, regaining his strength day by day, helping with small tasks around the ranch as his energy allowed. Nora watched him carefully, terrified he would push too hard and relapse. But Ethan knew his limits better than she had given him credit for. By spring, he was working alongside the hands, learning to rope and ride and mend fence. He would never be as strong as the others. The tuberculosis had damaged his lungs permanently, but he was competent and willing, and the men respected that. One evening in late March, Nora was in the office going over accounts when Colton knocked on the doorframe. Got a minute? He asked. Always. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to run something by you. He sat down across from her, that nervous habit of turning his hat in his hands very much in evidence. I've been thinking about the mines. What about them? I want to sell them. All of them except Silver Creek. Nora set down her pencil. That's most of your fortune. I know. But I've spent years trying to run those operations ethically, and it's exhausting. Every month there's a new safety concern, a new problem, another reminder that mining is fundamentally dangerous work. He rubbed his face. I can implement every safety protocol in existence, and men will still die down there. I'm tired of profiting from that risk. What about Silver Creek? I want to keep it, but change how it operates. Make it a worker cooperative. The men who actually do the mining own shares, make decisions about safety and production, share the profits. He leaned forward. It's never been done before, not successfully, but I think it could work. It's a massive risk. Everything worth doing is a risk. You taught me that. He smiled slightly. What do you think? Nora thought about her father, about the 12 men who died because someone else valued profit over their lives. Thought about all the miners still working dangerous jobs, hoping their luck held one more day. I think it's the right thing to do, she said. But you need to be prepared for pushback. Other mine owners won't like you setting that kind of precedent. Let them complain. I've got enough money from selling the other mines to fund this ranch for years. I don't need their approval. What does this mean for us? For the partnership? Colton met her eyes. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. I want to make the partnership official. Equal shares in the ranch, equal say in all decisions. Not employer and employee anymore. Real partners. Why? Because this place exists because of you as much as me. Because you've proven over and over that you're better at this than I am. And because, he stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. Because I trust you more than anyone I've ever known. And I want that reflected in more than just words. Nora sat back, processing this. Equal partnership meant equal risk, equal responsibility. It meant tying her future completely to this place, to Colton, to a life she hadn't imagined a year ago. It also meant security, ownership, a stake in something real. I want conditions, she said. Colton laughed. Of course you do. What are they? First, we establish a fund for the workers. Fair wages, yes, but also sick pay. Injury compensation, retirement savings. I don't want anyone working here to end up like I was in Red Hollow. Agreed. Well, what else? We use part of the profits to build a school. Not just for our workers' kids, but for any family in the territory who needs it. Free education, real teachers, books and supplies included. That's expensive. So is ignorance. My father could barely read. I taught myself from borrowed books and newspapers. Nobody should have to do that. She crossed her arms. A school means the next generation has choices we didn't have. Colton nodded slowly. A school, all right, that's two. What's the third? We fund a clinic. Hire a real doctor. Someone who'll treat people whether they can pay or not. Stock it with medicine, modern equipment. Everything needed to give folks a fighting chance when they get sick or hurt. You want to build a whole community here. I want to build something that lasts. Something that helps people instead of using them up. She leaned forward. That's the condition, Colton. We make this place about more than profit. We make it about what's right. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You know, most people would say that's naive, he said finally. That business can't afford to be charitable. Then most people are wrong. You can make money and do right by people at the same time. It's harder, takes longer, costs more. But it's possible. She held his gaze. The question is whether you're willing to try. Colton stood up and held out his hand. Equal partners, fair wages and benefits for workers, a school and a clinic funded from profits. We build something that lasts and helps people. Deal? Nora looked at his hand, thought about how far she had come from that saloon in Red Hollow. Thought about her father who died for someone else's profit. About Ethan, who had survived because someone chose to help. About all the people still struggling in places like she had escaped from. She stood and shook his hand. Deal. They drew up the papers that week, made it official with lawyers and witnesses. Nora Vance, equal partner in the Reed Ranch. It felt surreal signing her name to documents that made her co-owner of 5,000 acres and everything on it. Ethan was there for the signing, grinning like he had won a prize. You did it, he said afterward. You actually did it. We did it. You're part of this too. I'm just a ranch hand. You're my brother. That makes you part of this whether you want to be or not. She pulled him into a hug. We survived, Ethan. Both of us. We actually made it. The school broke ground that summer. They hired a teacher from back east, a young woman named Elizabeth, who had grown tired of city life and wanted to make a difference. The building went up in 2 months. One large room with real desks and a stove for winter, windows facing south for light, bookshelves that Colton ordered filled with volumes from San Francisco. The first day of school, 15 children showed up. Kids from the ranch, from neighboring homesteads, from families who had never imagined their children would get an education. Nora stood at the back of the room and watched Elizabeth begin her first lesson, and felt something break open in her chest. This was what mattered, not the money or the land or the success. This, giving children chances their parents never had, making the future different from the past. The clinic opened that fall, a clean white building with a doctor named Harrison, who treated everyone who walked through the door: minors with silicosis, children with fever, women with difficult pregnancies, old men with failing hearts. He didn't always save them, but he tried, and he charged what people could afford, which was often nothing. Colton funded it without complaint, even when the cost ran higher than projected. "This is what we agreed to," he said, when Nora showed him the quarterly expenses. "Building something that helps people. The money'll be there or it won't. But either way, we keep our word." The worker cooperative at Silver Creek launched the following spring. It was messy, complicated, full of arguments and confusion as miners learned to make decisions collectively. But production stayed steady, safety improved, and the men who had spent their lives working for someone else's profit finally had a stake in their own labor. Other mine owners called Colton crazy, said he was destroying the industry with his radical ideas. He ignored them. A few called him worse things, threatened to run him out of the territory. He told them to try. None of them did. 2 years after that first handshake in the saloon, Nora stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out at everything they had built. The cattle herd had grown to 300 head. The school had expanded to 2 rooms with 30 students. The clinic had saved countless lives, including old Martinez when his heart gave out, and Dr. Harrison managed to restart it. Ethan was working full-time now, managing the horse breeding program they had started. He still had trouble when winter came, and his lungs tightened up, but he was alive and happy, and building something with his own hands. Colton walked up beside her, coffee in hand, surveying the same view. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. "Every day. Any regrets?" Nora considered the question seriously. "I regret that my father isn't here to see this. I regret the years I spent barely surviving in Red Hollow. I regret that it took someone dying for things to change. But I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret the work we've done or the people we've helped. I don't regret fighting for something better instead of accepting what we were given." She looked at him. "What about you? Any regrets?" "I regret not telling you the truth sooner. I regret the time I wasted being a coward." He was quiet for a moment. "But I don't regret meeting you. Don't regret building this with you." Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding. Maybe, or acceptance. They had never been just employer and employee again. Probably had never been that even from the start. But they weren't exactly friends either. Weren't family. Weren't anything that had a simple name. They were partners, in business, in purpose, in the work of building something that mattered. That was enough. The years passed. The ranch prospered, not because they chased profit, but because they treated people fairly and built things to last. The school produced its first graduates, young people who went on to college or careers, or stayed to work the land with knowledge their parents never had. The clinic became a regional medical center, serving families from 50 miles around. The Silver Creek Cooperative proved so successful that other miners across the territory started demanding similar arrangements. Some owners resisted, but others saw the writing on the wall and adapted. Working conditions improved. Safety became standard instead of luxury. Men stopped dying in the dark for someone else's fortune. It wasn't perfect. It was never perfect. There were setbacks and failures, seasons when the cattle market crashed or the crops failed. Winters when the clinic ran out of medicine and people died anyway. There were arguments between Nora and Colton about money and priorities. Fights that sometimes lasted days before they found compromise. But they kept going, kept building, kept fighting for what they believed in. Ethan married a girl from town, a blacksmith's daughter named Annie, who was smarter than anyone gave her credit for. They had 3 children who grew up running wild across the ranch, learning to ride before they could read, filling the house with noise and chaos and joy. Nora never married. She had offers. There were men who saw her success and wanted to be part of it, or who genuinely seemed to care about her. But she had built a life she loved, had autonomy and purpose and work that mattered. Marriage felt like trading that for something smaller, and she wasn't willing to make that trade. "You're going to end up alone," Ethan warned her once, watching his kids play in the yard. "I'm surrounded by people I care about who care about me," Nora said. "That's not alone. It's just different." Colton never married either. He dated occasionally, women from Stillwater or Helena, who lasted a few months before realizing he was married to the work and always would be. He didn't seem bothered by it. "Some people are meant for families," he told Nora one evening. They were sitting on the porch as they often did, reviewing the day, planning the next. "Some people are meant for other things." "What are we meant for?" "Building, fixing, making things better than we found them." He smiled. "That's enough for me." It was enough for Nora, too. On the 10th anniversary of that first day in Red Hollow, the day Colton had walked into the saloon and changed everything, Nora rode out to her father's grave. She hadn't been back to Red Hollow in years, had no desire to see that town again. But the cemetery was different, sacred in its way. She stood at the simple headstone, weathered now by a decade of Montana winters, and told her father about everything that had happened, about Ethan's recovery, about the ranch and the school and the clinic, about the cooperative at Silver Creek, about fair wages and safe working conditions, and all the changes they had fought for. "We didn't forget," she said to the stone and the earth and whatever part of him might still be listening. "We didn't let them erase you. Your name is cleared and your death means something now. It's not enough. It'll never be enough, but it's something." The wind blew across the cemetery, carrying the smell of sage and distant rain. Nora knelt and placed wildflowers on the grave, lupine and Indian paintbrush, the same flowers that grew on the ranch. Then she rode back to the life she had built from the ashes of the one that had been taken from her. When she was 65 and Colton was 70, they stood together at the dedication of the Edward Vance Memorial Library. It had taken 5 years to build, funded entirely by profits from the ranch and the cooperative. 3 floors of books and reading rooms open to anyone in the territory, with a bronze plaque at the entrance listing the names of the 12 men who died at Silver Creek. Ethan was there with his wife and children and grandchildren. Martinez was there, old now, but still sharp, still working the ranch when his body allowed it. Workers from the mine came, and families who had used the clinic, and students from the school who had gone on to become teachers and doctors and lawyers. The territorial governor gave a speech about progress and reform. Elizabeth spoke about the importance of education. Dr. Harrison talked about how communities heal when they invest in their people. Then Nora stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd of faces, young and old, rich and poor, people who had survived, and people who were still fighting. "My father couldn't read very well," she said, "but he knew the value of knowledge. He used to tell me that education was the difference between surviving and living, between accepting what you're given and demanding what you deserve." She paused, gathering her thoughts. This library isn't just about books. It's about what books represent. The idea that everyone deserves access to knowledge, to history, to stories about people who fought for something better. It's about remembering where we came from so we don't end up back there. She looked at the bronze plaque. 12 men died because someone valued profit over their lives. We can't bring them back, but we can make sure their deaths meant something. We can build a world where that kind of tragedy becomes impossible instead of inevitable. She stepped back from the podium. The crowd applauded, but she barely heard it. She was thinking about that girl in Red Hollow, exhausted and desperate, serving drinks to men who would never remember her name. Thinking about how far that girl had come, how much she had fought for, how much she had won. Not because someone saved her, but because she had refused to stay saved, had insisted on becoming a partner instead of a project, had fought for agency instead of accepting charity. That was the real victory, not the money or the success, or the buildings with her father's name on them, but the fact that she had done it herself, on her own terms, with her dignity intact. That night, back at the ranch, Nora and Colton sat on the porch one last time. They were old now, both of them, their bodies worn down by decades of hard work and high altitude. But they were still here, still fighting, still building. "You think we did enough?" Colton asked quietly. "I think we did what we could with what we had," Nora said. "And that's all anyone can do. The school and the clinic and the library, they'll outlast us, keep helping people after we're gone. That was the point, wasn't it? To build something that lasts." Colton nodded slowly. "I never thanked you properly for staying that day when you found out about my father, for giving me a chance to make things right. You gave me a chance first, when I was nobody, working at the saloon, watching my brother die. You saw something worth saving. I saw someone worth knowing. There's a difference." Nora smiled at that. After 10 years, she finally believed him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire journey. The ranch spread out below them, solid and real, full of people and purpose, and the kind of messy, complicated life that was worth living. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. The clinic lights burned against the growing darkness. The library stood white and perfect against the purple sky. This was their legacy, not perfect, not complete, but real, built from grief and guilt and stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't be better. "We conquered it," Nora said quietly. "Conquered what?" "The frontier. Not by surviving it, but by making it better than it was, by refusing to let it break us or make us cruel." She looked at him. "We didn't just survive. We won." Colton smiled, tired but genuine. "Yeah, I think we did." They sat there until the stars came out. Two old partners who had spent a lifetime building something that mattered. And when they finally went inside, the lights they had left burning continued to shine across the darkness, guiding other people home. The story didn't end there, of course. Stories never really end. They just continue in different voices. Ethan took over the ranch when Nora and Colton got too old to manage it, running it with the same principles they had established. His children spread those principles farther, to other ranches and other communities, until treating workers fairly and investing in education and healthcare became normal instead of radical. The cooperative model at Silver Creek inspired changes across the mining industry. Not everywhere, not all at once, but slowly, inexorably. The balance of power shifted. Workers demanded safety, dignity, fair compensation. Some owners resisted and failed. Others adapted and prospered. The library became a symbol of what communities could build when they worked together. Other towns established their own, funded by local businesses and private donations, creating a network of knowledge that stretched across the territory. And in all of it, people remembered the story of a girl from nowhere who had refused to accept what she was given, who demanded better and fought until she got it, who transformed grief into purpose and built something that outlasted them all. That was what mattered in the end. Not the money, or the success, or the buildings, but the idea that one person could make a difference, that refusing to accept injustice could actually change things, that partnership built on honesty and mutual respect was stronger than any hierarchy. Nora died at 72, peacefully in her sleep in the bedroom she had occupied for nearly 50 years. Colton followed 6 months later, his heart finally giving out after a lifetime of hard use. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, simple stones marking their graves, but their real monument was everything they had built together. The school that educated generations, the clinic that saved countless lives, the library that preserved knowledge and history, the ranch that proved you could prosper while treating people right, the mine cooperative that showed workers they had power when they claimed it. Those things remained long after they were gone, testament to what two imperfect people could accomplish when they refused to accept that the world had to stay broken. And sometimes, late at night when the ranch was quiet, people swore they could feel something watching over it all. Not ghosts exactly, but presences. The weight of old promises kept, the echo of voices that had demanded better and refused to settle for less. The story lived on, because they had made it worth telling, not as some fairy tale where everything worked out perfectly, but as a real, complicated, difficult journey from despair to hope, from powerlessness to agency, from survival to something that looked a lot like victory. That was enough. It had to be enough. And in the end, it was more than enough. It was everything.